Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zipursky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Joining Michael on the show today is Amy Anderson, who's a dynamic industry leader known for using creativity to revolutionize brands and organizations across various sectors. Her expertise lies in enhancing client value through innovative brand, growth strategies, team design, and marketing approaches. At Wild Coffee, she spearheads business transformation through comprehensive services like brand strategy, digital marketing, PR, and marketing consulting, acting as a de facto CMO. But before we dive into today's episode, are you ready to grow and take your consulting business to the next level? Many of the clients we work with started as podcast listeners just like you. And a consistent theme they have shared with us is they had wished they had reached out sooner about our Clarity Coaching program rather than waiting for that perfect time. If you're interested in learning more about how we help consultants just like you, we are offering a free, no-pressure growth session call. Where on the call, we will dive deep into your goals, challenges, and situation and outline a plan that is tailor-made just for you. We will also help you identify where you may be making costly and time-consuming mistakes to ensure you're benefiting from proven methods and strategies to grow your consulting business. Don't wait years to find clarity. If you're committed and serious about reaching a new level of success in your consulting business, go ahead and schedule your free growth session call today. Just visit consultingsuccess.com/grow to book your free call today. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit more about what you're going to learn in today's episode with Amy. First is how to transform client satisfaction into long-term growth, how to evaluate and implement new service offerings as market demands evolve, keeping your firm competitive and relevant, how to enhance your team's effectiveness by carefully selecting the right talent and avoiding common hiring pitfalls. Secure future business by actively developing a robust and continuous potential clients, and how to optimize your daily schedule as a CEO, plus so much more. Here to share with you her story and insight is Amy Anderson. Enjoy.
So let's start off right away. Your firm got onto the Inc. 5000 list. A lot of people, you can share if you'd like a little bit of background of that, but what I'm interested most of all to have you to hear from you right away is, what do you think caused the level of growth that allowed you to get onto the Inc. 5000 list? Because for those that, again, that don't know, the Inc. 5000 list is really about kind of the fastest growing companies in the US. So how do you get on it? What was the real driver for growth?
Sure. Well, the Inc. 5000 list is always something I've admired from afar. Not something I really thought was possible for me as I'm starting off on my own, creating a little marketing strategy firm, not really even thinking about scale. And Inc. 5000 looks at 3-year revenue trajectory. And when I looked from 19 to 22, after having survived COVID and then saw this growth rate we're experiencing, I said, let's throw our hat in the ring here and see, where we end up. And we ended up number 4,288 out of 5,000, which is public knowledge, sort of where we ended up there. But we were absolutely thrilled, and we're going to go for it again this year.
Love it. Well, first of all, congratulations on that, because that is a great accomplishment. So tell me a little bit more behind that, because again, you're still kind of top 5,000 of people that at least submitted for this. So that means that there is growth. I don't know if you remember offhand what the growth kind of levels were across those 3 years. If you do, I'd love to hear that. But what do you think created that growth? What were you doing specifically or focusing on during that period of time that you believe allowed you to achieve that level of growth?
Well, the growth was over 40% in 2 of those years. And I think we grew a lot by expanding our agreements and engagements with existing clients. Also adding new service areas. So, we're a marketing consulting firm and thinking, where can we scale with less grind? Where do we have the best margins? Where are the top line opportunities? And should we focus on a few niches here? And we really started to exploit franchise and dive deeper into running marketing for large franchise brands and really figuring out our B2B marketing, intellectual property and approach and diving deeper into there. But we had several clients who said, you know what, this is working. We trust you. We're growing. Our top line revenue is growing. We want more. And let's expand the scope. And a lot of it came from there.
There's a lot that you just shared right now that I think could be its own little kind of mini workshop for people. So you talked about number one, focusing on existing clients, just as opposed to, new client. And of course there was, I'm sure, new client acquisition as part of that. Is that something that you feel you focus more on at that time? Or like, I guess what I'm getting at is, were you always thinking about this, or did something happen that kind of caused you to think, you know what, we should be focusing more on our existing clients as a way to actually grow the business?
That's a good question. Because we're an outsourced marketing team versus a traditional agency model, we actually create more work for ourselves as the nature of what we do. So we don't sign an engagement with a client and say, okay, this is the scope and we're doing these creative services and these digital services. We are their outsourced CMO because we believe every company deserves a CMO, just not necessarily full-time due to budgets, but that strategy needs to be in there. So we are constantly as a team ideating and always looking for new opportunities and always looking to drive revenue and drive growth. And by the nature of that and presenting that to clients, I guess you could call it an upsell, but it's not sort of it's just built into the nature of how we work for sure.
And when you say so, acting kind of as a fractional CMO, right, chief marketing officer, that typically, right, is much more on the strategy side, not so much on the tactical, actually doing the work. Does your firm do the actual work as well for clients, or how does that actually get done then?
We do. We say often that we are outsourced CMOs and strategists who own our own creative services agency in-house. So I spent the first 25 years of my career as a client-side marketer. So I worked with brands such as 17 Magazine and Calvin Klein and the New York Times. And when I got into financial services, later I had big teams, big budgets, and then the mortgage crash happened. And I had to sort of reevaluate what direction I was going in. And it just made sense to me. I said, why can't I do this for multiple companies at the same time? Why am I just contributing to this one when maybe I can diversify and have a little bit more variety and excitement and sort of outsource this way? And that's how that started.
Can you give an example? I mean, you talked about going in and finding ways to expand the value that you're providing to clients, or you also mentioned adding more services, which is interesting because in the early stages of any kind of consulting professional service business, typically real growth comes from having fewer services and doing them really well. But as you get to that scale level, right, and you're moving up and looking for ways to grow, and in this case, you now have 20 full-time people. So you have the kind of infrastructure or resources to do that, right? Then it makes sense to look at adding more. But walk us through maybe one example of how did you find additional value for a client? How did you start thinking about adding on an additional service? What did that look like?
Sure. So we typically do a lot of B2B, and I mentioned franchise. As part of that, we did not do local store marketing or LSM in the franchise space. My business partner, who I co-founded the company with, actually started his first agency in that space. And it's a grind, right? He worked with Orange Theory from locations 1 to 300 and new franchisees and getting them new leads and memberships prior to opening. And it's really intense. And so we always sort of stayed away from that side of the business and focused on franchisor strategy. How are we going to grow this network from 10 franchisees to 100? And then we started the more franchisor work we started doing. They really trusted us to be doing the local store marketing as well. And so we had always sort of outsourced to 2 or 3 different independent digital folks that we trusted, were on our roster for 3 years. And then we said, you know what? Our clients really want this from us. They really trust us with this. And we need to bring that team in-house and build it from the ground up. So digital is an area that we could very comfortably outsource for a long time with key partners. And now we have built the function in. It's a different process, Michael. It's different process, different sort of set of values, different financial model than everything that we do on a retainer basis. And so we really, really had to think through sort of how does this work together?
Yeah, I mean, no, I love that point, because that's actually was kind of what was on my mind in terms of a follow-up question. Is there a model that you used, or what did you need to consider before doing that? Because I think a lot of people that are listening, maybe in a similar position either now or in the near future, where they see an additional service or product that they could potentially start offering to the market, but there's risks involved because you have something that is likely already working. And so to shift your energy and focus to something else, especially if it requires a lot of resources to support it, it's a decision that you need to really think through. So any tips you would have for somebody who might be at that place where they're considering offering a new product or service, what should they maybe be kind of considering or looking at?
Well, I think you need to look at the financial model, the process, and if it's sort of adjacent and not too far off from what you're already doing. Because, in a bigger corporate world, spin-offs happen when the values, the resources, the processes don't align. And they say, you know what, we're going to spin this part of the business off. So you don't want to start something that would sort of be considered as a spin-off from the beginning. But the process is really important. I mean, I think that's part of the intellectual property that consultants have, is really what process, what's the product market fit, what are you delivering? But that process piece is really critical for us all to look at.
Yeah, great advice. All right. So you talked about, I want to ask you about kind of how you went about building your team of now 20 full-time people. But before we get there, you touched on or mentioned this focus around kind of franchises and making that a big part of the business. It sounds like it didn't start off that way. And so I'd love to hear how you got to that place where it became apparent that you should really focus more on that. And I bring this up because this we probably see as being one of the biggest challenges that consultants have, especially when they're earlier stage. They're bringing a lot of experience, expertise. They could help a lot of different types of people, different industries. So narrowing in becomes challenging. But even for those that have been in business for quite some time and are successful, you often kind of, do an inventory of all their clients and projects and profitability. And you usually start to see that certain ones are performing a lot better than others. And so they can also benefit from doing this, even though people tend to kind of hesitate to narrow in and focus. So how did you get to that place? Can you kind of share a bit of that journey and what you went through to get there?
Sure. So in the beginning, we took everything, we didn't really feel that we had a choice. We have some clients we call COVID clients that we took for the cash flow, knowing that the profitability was going to be challenging. There are clients that we didn't think that we had a good fit because we didn't think that we could go deep enough, but we took them because of the cash flow and our desire to grow. So that at the beginning, I think you have to go wide. As we started to go along and started to grow the business, it became very apparent.
All right, Amy, we're back after a little technical sound issue there. I think we're all good. So the question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you mentioned about the focus on franchises. And early on, that's right, not typically where people find themselves with that level of clarity or focus. They take on a lot of different types of business. But I'm interested to know how you got to that place and really deciding to narrow in and focus on franchise business specifically.
Sure. So in the beginning, we took a little bit of everything. We had to go broad. We were figuring out our model too. So we were thinking initially we would have a large volume of clients at a smaller retainer number. And then we would mitigate client concentration risk, things like that. Then we ended up getting an introduction because almost all of our business was referral based in the beginning. We did not do any inbound. I had been in the business for a long time, my business partner, and people called when they found out what we were doing. We ended up with a client that had 50 locations and found really early on that they needed a system that they needed to develop for marketing and marketing support. And so we figured out from the ground up what that complete system looked like. And then as we started to talk to other franchisors, we realized that this specific type of knowledge was really instrumental to growth for them. And not just anybody can come in. On the creative side, sure, you can build digital campaigns, you can build branding, and we do all of that. But it's the actual sort of strategy that goes into a nuanced franchise network. The same is the case for mortgage. We both came from the financial services industry. So we had some previous clients call us and we realized, wow, when you're a loan originator, there is a lot of nuance and specialization here. Let's go a little deeper. So I think there are probably 4 or 5 industries that we can go in and feel really confident that we can make a difference very early on from a strategy and execution standpoint. So I think it's to also take on as much as you can, learn what you love, learn what you're good at, certainly know what's profitable. That's critical too. If you're in an industry where they just don't have the budget to support your consulting, then it might not be a good product market fit.
How do you handle the situation where, let's say you get approached, somebody wants to hire you and work with you and your team, but it doesn't fit into one of those buckets that you have already kind of selected as being your core focus, for example, one of them being franchise?
We immediately ask ourselves, can we be successful for them? We actually left a meeting yesterday where it's just their early stage, a little bit disorganized, haven't really led a team like us before. Founder CEOs are different than professional CEOs. Love founder CEOs. They're nimble, they move fast, they're bold, and sometimes they haven't managed a group like us. And there are some challenges. We can teach that, how to manage us and how to work with us. But I think that's the number one thing that we really ask ourselves is, can we make a difference here? Will they listen to our advice? Do we have the budget to help them grow? Is it a category with some white space in it for us to advance? And if those things can't happen, we will have a pretty frank conversation and maybe we'll steer them in a different direction. We keep some other firms in our back pocket to refer.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching. The way you wrote that down, I believe will be very helpful for people because as part of the qualification process, it's quite common for people to not, like they have maybe a sense of who they want to work with, but they don't actually have set criteria listed that they can kind of, go through a mental checklist to see like, does this match or not? And then you end up taking on clients and projects that really you shouldn't have taken on. And even, if it's for the money, you usually end up regretting it unless you're in a position where you truly need the cash flow. Let's shift to talk about your team. So today you're a team of 20 full-time. Rewind the clock a little bit and share who was the first hire. When you decided you actually want to start building a team, what did that look like? Who was it? What was their role?
Oh, such a good question. So the first person we hired was to move the work through a system. So we had a series of freelancers and we were out getting new business and they were responsible for moving the work through the system. Typically when we started, we hired client-side marketers. Because we said, well, we're an outsourced marketing firm. You need to have a strong marketing background. And what we soon learned is that client-side marketers were not as adept at managing multiple engagements at the same time. So when we started, we really thought it was the marketing expertise. And what I have learned since then is it's really the ability to manage multiple projects. It is the client-facing piece that I don't think is as easy to teach. So I will teach you everything I know about marketing, our approach, how we sort of approach these engagements, the foundational work we do, the branding, all of that's teachable. What I'm looking for is somebody who can really change gears quite a bit, who can be incredibly nimble and is very confident and comfortable in front of clients. And so we've shifted more towards hiring from agency and consulting backgrounds versus sheer sort of pure marketing backgrounds.
Got it. And so is the distinction just that the person has experience working in an agency environment where they were likely dealing with multiple projects at once, or is there an actual job title, kind of job description difference as well?
It depends on where in the organization. In more leadership roles, we would be looking for an account director, a head of strategy, things like that. Because we are so strategy driven, it's not just taking an order from a client and putting it into the pipeline and then bringing it back to them. And that's in many ways can be a traditional sort of agency model. With ours, they're actually the director of marketing or VP of marketing for 5 different companies at the same time. So they have to be thinking, what KPIs am I tracking? How am I helping this client grow? And doing that 5 times over. So it's not for everyone in that case. You're not going to have a single engagement with us and be able to go so deep all the time. But I think that's the thrill of it. I don't know that I could never go back client side and be a CMO for a single company because I love working on multiple engagements at the same time.
What's the value proposition then for the buyer, your client? So just kind of take us into their world. Why would they hire a fractional CMO, which in this case is not, like oftentimes people think fractional being only one person, but with your firm, it sounds like they're getting one person, but they're actually getting a whole team that surrounds that one person. Why would they do that as opposed to what, I'd say probably still most firms do, which is they're going to go and look for and hire the full-time in-house, CMO. What's the value prop there? How do you position that? What does that kind of conversation look like?
Well, companies of a certain size can afford a full-time CMO and in-house marketing team. But there's this middle market that exists where a full-time CMO is not affordable and actually not needed because you can do strategy on an annual, quarterly, half-year basis and have that in place. And it's also a huge commitment, not only financially, but to find the right person to lead your marketing efforts. Typically, CMOs are leaders of people, leaders of strategy, but not doers. So then you need to bring your team of doers in. In this digital first environment, there are so many skill sets that need to be covered. And then you don't necessarily need those skill sets full time. So it is much more cost effective to hire a fractional marketing team. It is advantageous to hire a CMO fractionally to help you get your strategy set and get everything on course. So we go into large franchise companies, large B2B companies, there may be one person and that person is so strapped and they can't cover everything. We typically will report to the CEO and serve as the entire marketing team. So lower cost structures, covering all the skill sets fractionally.
What does that typical client look like in terms of size, revenue, so people kind of have a sense of how big, is this organization that's bringing you in?
20 to 150. So I know that's a wide range. We're not an early stage firm. Typically, they could use maybe a super small agency or set of freelancers in an emerging stage. We work with private equity companies. We have 4 we have partnered with, and they actually bring us in as the value creation team for their portfolio companies. So these companies have been capitalized. They have some sort of market presence. They typically are very niche, but there's huge growth opportunities for them. Typically, they're capitalized at around 30 million with 6 to 10 in EBITDA. But they haven't had the marketing expertise. They maybe haven't had budgets. We were just brought in as the outsourced CMOs for a home improvements company, for example. So we're running RFPs for SEO firms, things like that, getting all of their reporting set up, making recommendations for brand, and it works. And then we can put a team in place, whether ours or in-house, and move forward from there.
All right. So I want to come back to the PE firm because to me, there's a lot to talk about there. Before you do that though, take me back to you said there's a cost kind of savings, or right. That's one of the value adds that you bring as opposed to bringing on a full-time CMO and maybe building a team around that person. I know a lot of people still have this belief, right, whether right or wrong, that having in-house is much better, right, than having external. Clearly, there's a lot of value in your case to go in the other direction. What does actual cost savings look like? I mean, compared to, let's say, bringing on a full-time CMO and maybe some team around them, how much different is that going to be by engaging your team?
We'll do an analysis in sort of a pitching stage and look at what the budgets are, what the market looks like, what are the skills and services required, and we can typically build a team for 30% less to 40% less than an in-house team, because they also have to, CEOs have to manage a CMO and a team. And if they don't go deep in digital, it is very difficult for them to really assess. They can understand customer acquisition costs and tactics, but when you start to get into basis points of performance per area of digital, it's really hard to optimize that. And unless your CMO can sort of manage that and get that done for you at all times, I think there's less risk because you can move on. If you outsource it, if it's not working, it's a huge commitment to bring a senior level person in like that.
That makes sense. All right. So before we start talking about some marketing and private equity stuff, I got to know about the name Wild Coffee. Where does this come from?
Wild coffee is actually a plant native to South Florida, a long way from you. It was growing outside of my window in Miami when I was writing my original business plan. And it's a native plant. I wouldn't call it a weed. It's just native. So it grows in random places, but it kept covering the window and I'd have to cut it back with a machete. And it was shiny and had these shiny berries. And I thought it was a really wonderful metaphor for what I was trying to create for a company and what we were trying to do with our clients. It's sort of this beautiful self-propelled growth, and that's what we're trying to sort of unlock.
I love it. Okay, well, I will definitely look into that more. I have this little tradition with my girls that every night at dinner, they each get to ask one question and we'll look up the answer because they usually ask questions I don't know what the answers are. And so I'll try and weave in the Wild Coffee one into one of those questions because that's the first that I've heard of it. So thank you for that. Let me ask you about marketing. One of the biggest areas that consultants often struggle in is lead generation, building a thriving pipeline of opportunities. It sounds like, today you're at a place where you do have a very solid pipeline. And I'd love to know, what are you doing today to continue to grow that pipeline and continue to bring in high quality, high value clients and opportunities? And then what I'd also like to hear is, how does that compare to what you were doing, let's say 5 years ago or before, right, at the early stages of the business? How much of the marketing kind of tactics and strategy and approaches has shifted over the years, and what are the differences?
Sure. So we got into the danger of relying on referrals. And we had a lot of them in the beginning. They were smaller engagements. And so we were willing to take those on. We were growing the company. The scale was much less. And we were very, very lucky. And then we came to a point where we had too much client concentration. So as consultants, we always need to ask ourselves what percentage of our revenue is concentrated in 1, 2, 3 clients. And that started to get a little bit too high. And we knew we had to be intentional if we wanted to continue to grow at the rate that we were. So definitely it was interesting. The private equity route is where I've always wanted to be. I've always wanted to be sort of at the intersection of McKinsey and marketing, to be doing really interesting strategy work that we could dive in and actually, even from an innovation standpoint, recommend product development in some sort of manufacturing and industrial places. I want CEOs to come to us and say, hey, we're really trying to grow this business. We know here are our plans, but how marketing owns so much more than pricing and promotion now. We own the digital experience. There's a product element to it, customer experience, all touch points for the brand. So we play a more pivotal role sort of in that. So I definitely went and looked at scales and strategic partnerships. Private equity is one, and software partners in our space.
How early on was that when you kind of saw that light bulb and thought, oh yeah, I should go down the strategic partnerships and, as you said, software and PE? How many years into the business was that?
Well, we started 6 years ago, and about 3 years into it, I started to see the space that I really wanted to play in. Plus, I find it interesting. Who wouldn't want to, in the consulting space, be looking for opportunities to invest in and grow businesses? To me, that's sort of what all of it is about. So 3 years in, I saw it, and it wasn't until about 2 years ago, 12 months later, that we signed our first agreement with a South Florida-based private equity firms. We've done projects across maybe 5 or 6 of their portfolio companies. We're with a middle market industrial value creator company out of Miami now. And I counted yesterday and we have 8 engagements simultaneously with them. And it's everything from branding and doing that foundational work to consistent lead generation, sort of the outsourced CMO strategy piece. So the work is really varied in that too. And I think it keeps it really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, many of the clients we work with who work with P as well as their clients. I mean, it's such a great opportunity because you land one client being the PE firm, they can bring you into so many opportunities that they have because they're always investing in new companies and looking for opportunities. So there's definitely a lot of leverage there. Can you just walk us through at a high level? You said it took about 12 months to go from deciding, yes, we're going to go after PE to actually getting the first deal signed. And to some people that might sound like, well, that's a very long time, but the world of bigger sales, 12 months is not necessarily that long. I mean, I'd say it's even pretty standard. But what did you do? What did that look like? Was it cold calling? Was it meeting people in person? Was it sending direct mail? Like, how did you go through from the initial idea to actually getting that first deal done?
I was most comfortable with introductions. So I think I was looking at my target list of understanding, who has longer investment horizons with their portfolio companies that marketing would really matter. If they're investing in companies that were too big, they probably already had in-house teams and agencies. So I needed this middle market. And I found that list. And then I actually looked and saw that a lot of them in this industry know each other. So I really looked for, hey, do you know someone here at X firm? Do you know someone here? And I asked for the introduction.
Sorry, who are you asking? When you say you were asking people, who are you asking? Like friends or colleagues?
I actually found I have a few friends and acquaintances in the business.
Okay.
So I went and said, do you know these guys in Fort Lauderdale? Do you know these guys in New York? I actually then went by industry and said, who's investing in franchise, right? Because then I have experience working with private equity firms and I have experience working with their sort of target portfolio companies. So it's really looking for a good fit for you that can give you some scale. Same with these software companies, strategic platforms. Anytime you're going after the same end client, there's an opportunity for you to co-market, to go after the same types of targets too. So we're doing that as well.
You mentioned that you built or acquired, somehow you got a list of who these ideal companies are. Can you share how do you go about kind of building that list?
Sure. So we have a person on our team that we actually gave them parameters and they scraped a lot of LinkedIn and did research there. And we actually did that with trying to data match CEOs of franchises of emerging brands to just figure out what that marketing list looks like. And then when we're going to the International Franchise Show, we're out. That's what I use to try to get meetings that way. So our approach has very much been belly to belly with a very distinct client list in a market. What we're starting to do now is sort of walking our own talk back with lead generation, inbound, funnel development, and starting to do that because we need to experiment on ourselves if this is the area that we're also consulting in for our clients.
Yeah. Is there anything outside of referrals and kind of the PE connections, so forth, that you've seen that is working on the marketing side, or is it still too early to tell?
Well, we're launching our first campaign in February. And look at the part of your business that's easier to scale. For us, it's the digital piece. So local store marketing for franchises or marketing strategy projects are two areas that we're targeting both on LinkedIn and on Google and trying to see if we can do some inbound. I'm starting to do, I mentioned to you earlier, some more video work and thought leadership anytime we're in a consultative sales approach. And I'm sure that most consultants do, sort of being very active on LinkedIn and publishing and videos. It is not my most comfortable place to be, despite being here with you today. It's something I really, Michael, I have to force myself to do. But I think it's important to sort of be out there and share what you know. And when people are vetting you and looking, it's just great for SEO, but they also sort of get a taste of who you are, how you work, what you think. And it's really important to be out there, even when it's uncomfortable.
I'd love to hear how you spend your time today. I'm sure there's some differences between how you go about structuring your day, your week, your month, as opposed to what it was like maybe 5 or 6 years ago when it was just you and your co-founder. What does it look like? How do you if there was a pie and you were to say, each piece of the pie, maybe it's delivery or it's strategy. First of all, what would those elements be for your pie in terms of where you spend your time on a given week? And then how would you kind of allocate the percentages across?
Okay. So news business. I have a mentor who is the chairman of a very large shipping company in the US that we all use. And I happen to be so lucky to live in the same town as him. And he met with me on Saturday and said, you're a sales driven company. If you're not selling all the time, then you don't have a business. And it was just a very good reminder. So business development is a major part of that. Running the business and looking at our metrics, our numbers, our financials is another major piece. We're selling time. Right? What is our inventory of time? How much do I have left to sell? How much have we billed? What is an acceptable non-billable percentage? What is our average hourly rate? What is our revenue per employee? What is out in terms of scopes, in terms of new business? What's coming in? And then when are we going to be able to execute on that? So,
Amy, how often do you review those metrics? So it sounds like you probably have a dashboard that you built or some way to kind of track all that. How often do you personally look at that data?
I look at billable data daily. Every day, I know how much the team has billed. I know every week, and I know by client how much we have expended towards our agreement. So we use project management software that helps us understand sort of the health and the status of every project that we have. So if there are 100 hours that we've committed to in a month, by 10 business days into the month, I can see if it's at 50% or 90% if we're running hot, because then there's some corrective action that we need to take. The team will usually come to us and say, hey, I'm running a little hot here. I'm going to prioritize this. I've talked to the client about pushing it into the next month. And that's how we try to run that there. But as far as time, I think it needs to be daily. Because it's almost as though, and the team understands us, it's as though you're working in a store and you're handing product over the counter and not charging for it. That's our commodity, is our time, our wisdom, and our creative output. So we keep pretty tight handles on those.
Okay, so business development and then looking at the metrics and staying on top of that. Is there anything else that goes into your pie? Are you involved in delivery at all anymore or anything else?
Yeah. So we've actually tried to really divide and conquer and not overlap. I think when you have a co-founder, well, especially with mine, I've known my business partner for 20 years. We've had this venture for 6. I think we had some like weird business codependency because we were going everywhere together in a lot of cases. And we said, we really need to distinguish who is the visionary and who's the integrator in this business. And so I am out doing new business and I'm responsible for the quality of the work and our approach to the work from a creative and marketing standpoint. So this is our intellectual property. This is how we do this. This is the quality of the creative and the strategy. This is the product that we are delivering to clients. And he ensures that everything is moving through and being delivered on time and according to agreements. So that division for co-founders, I think, is really hard when you have a long-term relationship with someone, and we've really had to separate ourselves. And that's this year, Michael. That wasn't 3 years ago. I think we're just so used to being together all the time and working in that way that it makes sense. And I think it's worked really well for the team. I think your team needs to think that distinguished as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to bring up. So my co-founder is my cousin, Sam, and we've been building this business together for about 14, 15 years, and then multiple other businesses in the past that we've gone through. So we've had that experience of seeing the overlap and then going, well, we're very similar in many ways. We're also very different in many ways. Let's lean into those differences where we can each create a lot of value. And the coordination with the team is a really important point, because at times it'd be like, I'll say something to the team and then Sam will say something different to the team. It's like, well, what's actually going on here? Let's stay in our lane. Let's be very clear about what our roles are and all of that, so that we don't cross signals and create confusion for others on the team. So it's a great reminder.
Yeah, organizational clarity is very key. We use EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, to run the business. I'm sure a lot of people do. It has been instrumental to our scaling the business. There are a couple of reasons for that. You need meeting cadences. You need planning cadences, short-term, long-term. And I think it's really important to dig into issues. I mean, I have clients, we actually sit in the C-suite for multiple clients. So for 2 years, I was in the executive meeting of a large client of ours. And the weekly meeting was people round robin of updates. And updates are not working. There are other ways to share information other than a weekly meeting with executives. It is time to dig into issues, ideas, topics, and have those discussions. And I think that you're not moving a business forward unless you're ideating and solving. And so I really love that portion of EOS and Gino Wickman's book Traction, because I think that it's real substantive conversations internally about the business. What are your roadblocks? What's not working? Where are things out of line? Or there's this new software, right, in marketing. If we are not learning all the time, then we're dead in the water. So I really believe in sort of digging into the actual sort of ideas and topics facing the business.
Before we wrap up, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what's your take on AI? How are you handling it? How are you thinking about it? Yeah, what's your stance?
Well, it's really, really good for augmenting what our creative teams are already doing. It helps them structure some of the writing. It helps them consider topics they hadn't considered before. It helps them increase their volume of productivity and give new ideas. I mean, it's sort of a backup idea generator to say, have I considered all points of this? Or is there an angle here that I haven't considered? And it is amazing when researching into a vertical and a category.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, nothing to be scared of, as some people are. It helps you to be even better. It'll make someone more powerful, more effective, more productive if they use it. And if they don't, then shame on them, because they'll probably be left a little bit in the dust there. Amy, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today, sharing just a bit of your story and journey. I know there's a lot more that people can learn from you. And so where's the best place for them to go to learn more about you and Wild Coffee?
Great. So Wild Coffee Marketing, we have a bunch of case studies up there actually to see sort of what the challenges and solutions were, how we address that. And we actually do consultations for business leaders looking to understand what the marketing opportunities for their business are, what we think about the brand, what they could be doing from a lead generation and growth standpoint. So we enable people to schedule those, and those are actually with me. And I love them. It's the part of the business that sort of keeps things fresh and keeps us on our toes and thinking. So we love to do those for people looking for help.
All right. We will link all up in the show notes. Again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
And there you have it for today's episode between Michael and Amy. If you enjoyed today's podcast interview, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to today's show. And to support the Consulting Success Podcast and team, be sure to share this episode out with a friend or colleague. Also, a quick reminder, if you want to get your free growth session call, be sure to head over to consultingsuccess.com/grow. That's the end of the line for us this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until next time.